You're not broke because you lack intelligence. You're not stuck because you lack opportunity. You're stuck because somewhere along the way, you started telling yourself comfortable lies, and those lies feel safe, reasonable, even responsible, but they quietly steal years of your life. Today isn't about motivation or hype. It's about exposing the stories you repeat to avoid hard decisions, the excuses that sound logical but cost you freedom, and the truth that only becomes clear when you stop negotiating with yourself. Most people don't realize that the biggest obstacle in their life isn't money, skill, or luck. It's the quiet agreement they've made with their own excuses. Self-deception rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It whispers. It tells you that you're being realistic, that now isn't the right time, that you'll act once conditions improve. These thoughts feel protective, almost wise, because they reduce anxiety in the moment. They help you sleep at night. But over time, they build a comfortable cage where nothing truly changes. The danger is not that these thoughts are false, but that they are partially true, just enough to be believable and just enough to delay real action. Comfortable lies often begin as reasonable explanations. You tell yourself you're waiting for more clarity, more money, more confidence, or more stability. On the surface, that sounds mature. Underneath, it's often fear negotiating for more time. Fear doesn't want to be exposed, so it dresses itself in logic. It says you're being patient, not afraid, responsible, not hesitant, strategic, not stuck. And because these words sound intelligent, you stop questioning them. You stop asking whether waiting is actually helping you or simply protecting you from discomfort. The human mind prefers emotional safety over long-term progress. It would rather feel calm today than fulfilled 10 years from now. This is why self-deception feels good in the short term. It removes urgency. It smooths over regret. It allows you to believe that your future self will somehow handle what you avoid today. But the cost of this comfort is invisible at first. Days pass normally. Months feel productive enough. Years slip by quietly. And one day you realize that the gap between where you are and where you hope to be wasn't created by a single mistake, but by thousands of small decisions to stay comfortable. One of the most dangerous lies people tell themselves is that they're doing fine. Fine is a powerful anesthetic. It doesn't signal pain strongly enough to demand change. It keeps you functional but unfulfilled. When you say you're fine, you stop searching for better questions. You stop pushing against your own limits. You accept average outcomes because nothing feels urgently wrong. But fine is often just another word for settled. And settling, when repeated long enough, becomes a habit that shapes your entire life. Another layer of self-deception appears when people confuse intention with action. You genuinely plan to improve. You think about it often. You imagine the version of yourself who has already changed. And because the mind feels rewarded by imagining success, it tricks you into feeling productive without doing the work. This is why planning can sometimes become a hiding place. You stay busy preparing, researching, thinking, and organizing, but you delay the moment when results become measurable. The lie isn't that you don't care. It's that caring alone is enough. Self-deception also thrives in comparison. You look at others who seem worse off and use that contrast to justify stagnation. You tell yourself that at least you're not failing like them. At least you're more responsible, more stable, more sensible. This comparison creates a false sense of progress. It shifts the standard from personal growth to relative comfort. Instead of asking whether you're becoming the person you're capable of being, you ask whether you're doing better than someone else. That question keeps you small because it lowers the bar to wherever it feels easiest to clear. There is also a lie inside routine. Repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates the illusion of control. When your days look the same, you feel grounded. Predictability reduces fear, but it can also quietly erase ambition. You begin to confuse stability with success. You protect routines not because they serve your future, but because they make the present feel manageable. Over time, the routine becomes your identity, and challenging it feels like a threat to who you are, not just what you do. The most convincing lies are the ones that make you feel responsible while avoiding accountability. You tell yourself you're prioritizing family, health, or balance, when in reality you're avoiding the risk of failure. These values are real and important, but self-deception uses them as shields. It reframes avoidance as virtue. And because the language sounds noble, you stop interrogating it. You stop asking whether you could honor these values while still demanding more from yourself. Breaking self-deception doesn't begin with motivation. It begins with discomfort. It begins the moment you stop explaining your behavior and start examining it. This is not a pleasant process. It requires sitting with truths that challenge your self-image. It requires admitting that some of your reasons are excuses, that some of your delays are choices, and that no one is coming to rescue you from the consequences of waiting. This realization can feel heavy at first, but it is also freeing, because the moment you stop lying to yourself, you regain control. Honorable. Honesty with yourself doesn't mean harsh self-judgment. It means clarity. It means asking better questions instead of accepting easy answers. It means noticing patterns instead of isolated events. When you look at your life as a series of repeated behaviors rather than one-time circumstances, the story becomes harder to ignore. You begin to see where comfort has replaced courage, where explanation has replaced execution, where time has been traded for temporary relief. The truth is that most people already know what they need to do. They just haven't allowed themselves to feel the full weight of not doing it. Self-deception dulls that weight. It keeps urgency at bay. But once honesty enters the picture, things shift. Decisions become sharper. Time feels more valuable. Excuses lose their emotional power. And progress, while still difficult, becomes simpler because it's no longer buried under layers of justification. When you stop lying to yourself, the world doesn't suddenly become easier, but it becomes clearer. And clarity is what turns effort into direction, patience into strategy, and fear into fuel. People rarely lie to themselves in obvious ways. The most damaging lies are subtle, reasonable, and dressed up as logic. These are not emotional outbursts or dramatic denials of reality. They are calm, rational explanations that sound mature, intelligent, and even responsible. That's what makes them dangerous. When excuses sound logical, they stop feeling like excuses at all. Feel like conclusions. And once something feels concluded, the mind stops revisiting it, stops challenging it, stops pushing further. A rational excuse often begins with facts. Life is busy. Responsibilities are real. Energy is limited. These statements are true, and that's exactly why the mind uses them as shields. It strings facts together to build a narrative that justifies inaction. You tell yourself you'll start when things slow down, when the timing is better, when you're more prepared. Each reason stands on its own, and together they form a convincing case for waiting. But logic without honesty becomes a delay mechanism. It doesn't ask whether waiting actually improves the outcome. It only asks whether waiting feels justified. The mind is incredibly skilled at turning fear into reason. Fear rarely announces itself directly. It doesn't say, I'm scared to fail or I'm afraid to look foolish. Instead, it says, this isn't the right moment, or I need more information, or I don't want to rush into a bad decision. These statements sound wise. They make you feel cautious rather than fearful, but caution, when overused, becomes paralysis. And because the language is logical, you don't feel stuck. You feel prudent. One of the most common rational excuses is the belief that more preparation will solve hesitation. You read more, watch more, plan more, and analyze more. Preparation becomes a substitute for action. The irony is that preparation feels productive. So it satisfies the mind's need to feel responsible while avoiding the risk that comes with execution. The excuse isn't that you're unprepared. It's that preparation has become a safe place to hide from results that can be measured. Another powerful excuse is the idea that you're protecting yourself from mistakes. You tell yourself that waiting prevents regret, that caution saves you from loss. But in reality, not deciding is still a decision. Time keeps moving whether you act or not. Opportunities expire. Energy shifts. Circumstances change. The regret you're trying to avoid doesn't disappear. It simply moves into the future where it becomes heavier because it's attached to lost time. Logic that focuses only on avoiding immediate mistakes often ignores the long-term cost of inaction. People also use rational excuses to preserve their identity. If you see yourself as careful, intelligent, or sensible, then acting boldly can feel like a threat to who you believe you are. So the mind generates explanations that allow you to stay consistent with your self-image. You say you're not impulsive, not reckless, not naive. These qualities are admirable. But when they are used to justify never stretching beyond what's familiar, they quietly turn into limitations. The excuse protects your identity, not your future. There is also comfort in shared excuses. When many people around you think the same way, your logic feels validated. If everyone says the economy is uncertain, the market is risky, or the future is unclear, then hesitation feels normal. Collective doubt becomes permission to stay still. The excuse feels stronger because it's reinforced socially. But widespread hesitation doesn't make it wise, it only makes it common. And common behavior rarely leads to uncommon outcomes. Rational excuses also tend to focus on what you might lose rather than what you're already losing. The mind is loss averse. It reacts more strongly to the possibility of immediate loss than to the certainty of gradual decline. So your logic emphasizes risks, downsides, and worst-case scenarios. It rarely calculates the cost of staying the same. It doesn't measure the erosion of confidence, the narrowing of options, or the slow buildup of frustration. Those losses are quiet, so logic ignores them. Another subtle excuse is the belief that clarity must come before movement. You tell yourself that once everything makes sense, action will feel natural. But clarity is often the result of action, not the requirement for it. Many things only become clear once you engage with them. Waiting for perfect understanding keeps you stuck at the edge, observing instead of participating. Logic convinces you that this is thoughtful behavior, but in reality, it postpones the very experiences that would create understanding. Excuses also hide inside priorities. You convince yourself that now isn't the right season of life, that other things deserve attention first. These priorities are often real and meaningful. But the excuse emerges when they are used as absolute reasons rather than variables to be managed. You don't ask how growth could fit into your current life. You assume it must wait until life is simpler. And since life rarely becomes simpler on its own, the delay becomes indefinite. The most dangerous part of rational excuses is that they reduce urgency. They remove emotional pressure. They make delay feel neutral, even smart. You don't feel lazy or irresponsible. You feel reasonable. And because there's no internal alarm, there's no trigger for change. You remain comfortable enough to stay where you are, even if you're deeply dissatisfied underneath. Breaking free from rational excuses requires a shift from explanation to ownership. It means asking not whether your reasons make sense, but whether they are producing the life you want. It means evaluating logic by outcomes, not elegance. A reason can sound intelligent and still be wrong for you. A delay can feel justified and still be costly. The moment you start measuring your excuses by their long-term impact, their power weakens. This kind of honesty is uncomfortable because it removes protection. You can no longer hide behind smart-sounding reasons. You're left with the reality that action is hard, uncertainty is unavoidable, and progress demands exposure to risk. But it also restores agency. When excuses lose their authority, choice becomes visible again. You see where you're opting out, where you're postponing, where you're protecting comfort instead of building capacity. Rational excuses thrive in the dark. They weaken when examined closely. When you slow down and ask yourself what you're really avoiding, what emotion sits underneath your logic, what outcome you're trying to protect yourself from, the story changes. Logic stops being a shield and starts becoming a tool. And when logic serves action instead of avoidance, momentum begins to return. One of the most common ways people deceive themselves is by staying busy instead of becoming effective. Movement feels like progress, especially when effort is visible and time is filled. Days packed with tasks give the impression that something meaningful is happening. You wake up early, respond to messages, handle responsibilities, and end the day tired. Fatigue becomes proof that you're working hard. But exhaustion is not evidence of advancement. Activity can drain your energy without moving your life forward even an inch. The mind loves activity because it creates the illusion of control. When you're busy, you feel needed, you feel involved, you feel responsible. There's a sense of importance attached to motion. But progress requires direction, not motion. It requires knowing what actually changes your position rather than what simply occupies your time. Without that distinction, you can spend years working intensely on things that never compound, never scale, and never bring you closer to the outcome you claim to want. Activity is seductive because it's measurable in the short term. You can count hours worked, emails sent, tasks completed. These metrics feel productive. They give your brain immediate feedback. Progress, on the other hand, is often quiet and slow. It doesn't always reward you with instant validation. You may work on one decision for weeks and see nothing obvious change. That silence makes progress emotionally uncomfortable. So the mind replaces it with busyness, where effort is obvious and praise is easier to earn. Another reason people confuse activity with progress is because activity reduces anxiety. When you're moving, you don't have to confront deeper questions. You don't have to sit with uncertainty or face the possibility that you might be focused on the wrong things. Busyness keeps reflection at bay. It fills the space where doubt might appear. This is why slowing down can feel unsettling. Stillness exposes whether your actions are aligned or simply habitual. Many people structure their days around urgency rather than importance. They respond to what demands attention first, not what creates change. Urgent tasks feel necessary because ignoring them creates immediate consequences. Important work often doesn't scream for attention. It waits quietly. It requires deliberate choice. Over time, you train yourself to equate urgency with value, and anything that doesn't demand immediate action gets postponed. This is how long-term progress is repeatedly sacrificed for short-term relief. There is also a social reward attached to activity. Being busy is admired. It signals commitment and effort. Saying you're overwhelmed earns sympathy. Saying you're focused on fewer, deeper priorities often invites misunderstanding. People may see it as laziness or lack of ambition. To avoid that judgment, many choose visible busyness over meaningful progress. They optimize for how their effort looks rather than what it produces. Activity can also become a hiding place from accountability. When you're always doing something, it's hard for others and yourself to pinpoint why results aren't showing up. You can point to effort instead of outcomes. You can say you've been trying, working, grinding. The narrative becomes about how hard the journey is, not whether it's effective. Over time, this story protects your self-image but quietly undermines your growth. Another trap is mistaking learning for progress. Consuming information feels productive. You watch, read, listen, and absorb. Knowledge accumulates, and with it comes a sense of advancement. But without application, learning becomes entertainment disguised as self-improvement. The mind confuses familiarity with mastery. You feel informed but unchanged. This loop is comfortable because it keeps you engaged without exposing you to failure. Progress often requires doing fewer things better, not more things at once. This idea feels counterintuitive in a culture that celebrates multitasking and hustle. Narrowing your focus feels risky. It means saying no, letting some tasks go undone, and trusting that depth will outperform volume. Activity thrives on quantity. Progress thrives on precision. But precision demands clarity, and clarity requires honest evaluation of what actually moves the needle. The cost of confusing activity with progress is cumulative. Weeks turn into months of effort without direction. Momentum feels real, but results remain distant. Frustration builds, and instead of reassessing focus, many people increase activity. They work harder, stay busier, push longer hours. This only deepens the trap. More motion in the wrong direction doesn't lead you closer. It just takes you farther from where you want to be, faster. Breaking this pattern starts with a shift in measurement. Instead of asking how busy you were today, you ask what actually changed because of your actions. What moved forward? What became clearer? What decision reduced future effort? These questions feel uncomfortable because they expose inefficiency. They force you to confront the possibility that much of your effort is misdirected. But this discomfort is productive. It points you toward leverage. Progress often comes from fewer, higher quality decisions rather than constant activity. One well-chosen action can eliminate dozens of unnecessary tasks. One clear priority can simplify an entire week, but these moments require thinking, not rushing. They require stepping back instead of pushing forward. To a busy mind, this feels like doing nothing. In reality, it's the most strategic form of work. When you stop equating movement with advancement, your relationship with time changes. You become less impressed by long hours and more attentive to meaningful outcomes. You begin to protect your focus instead of your schedule. You stop trying to fill every moment and start choosing which moments deserve your energy. This shift doesn't make you slower. It makes you intentional. True progress is often invisible to others and uncomfortable to yourself. It doesn't always come with applause or immediate results. It asks you to tolerate uncertainty and resist the comfort of constant motion. But once you experience the difference, once you see how a single focused effort can outweigh weeks of scattered activity, it becomes harder to go back. You start to recognize that being busy is easy, but moving forward requires courage, clarity, and restraint.